Welcome one and welcome all to the greatest show of them all, volume 114 of the NFC East Mixtape, which you can listen to on any one of SB Nation's NFC East blog podcast networks. You can also watch this on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel or the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel. He is Brandon Lee Gowton from BGN. I am RJ Ochoa from BTB. BLG, happy to see you. How are you? And I forgot to say this before we started recording. We actually have a meeting in 45 minutes. So this is going to be a really tight episode.
I thought it was in an hour and 45 minutes.
I
think I'm right, and I think you're wrong about that.
I think you're right, and I think I'm wrong. So we're good. We can go for an hour and 45 minutes if we want.
There we go. I did have something on my mind. It was about neighbor etiquette. RJ, how do you feel? So for the people who did not see, who are not watching on YouTube, I gave RJ and the people here a wave at the camera, which is prompting this question. How do you feel about neighbor etiquette as a whole, but specifically, like if you see your neighbor, are you gonna wave to them, especially if you're driving by? What's the protocol there?
So I think I live in a neighborhood and we walk our dog a lot. I walk the dog, my wife pushes the baby in the stroller. And so we're out a lot, you know what I'm saying? So like there is like a casual like, hey, how you doing? Like if you're really close, I think there is an actual like, how you doing? You know what I mean? But like nobody really answers that question. It's just like, good. You know what I'm saying? I do think if you're like in the front or the back of the house, like doing something, somebody drives by. I think the general rule is if you make eye contact, you got to give a slight wave. That's the general rule.
I agree with that. It's funny. We always like wave to our neighbors or back home at my parents. Also, I'm not the biggest fan of the talk though. Like when like your neighbor comes over to talk, especially like when you're just getting home. It's like I got home from somewhere. You don't know how long I was out. Like I could have been out for like multiple hours, and I need to like go back in my house and do stuff. It's one thing if you want to be like, hey, how's the weather? Like a 1 minute convo, but there has to be a time limit. It can't exceed like 1 minute, I feel like.
There's a real cornering feeling to that because it's like they know where you live. You know what I'm saying? So like it's like so yeah, that was a good question. We do have a review to get into if you're okay with that, if you'll allow it.
I'll allow it.
We actually were delayed in starting this episode, and it would have only been 45 minutes if I had been right about the meeting, but I wasn't. But so we were delayed in starting because of you, because you were finishing lunch. You had a pizza, which I think is pretty on brand for you. This review is on the Blog of the Boys side of things, and it comes to us actually from Joe's Lunch. So Joe is a big fan of lunch. That's his username here. So it is titled NFC East Mixtape is great. 5-star review. And for the record, if anybody wants to have the review read, we will read it. If you want to ask a question, you want to make a comment, whatever, go leave one on any one of the podcast networks and we'll totally get to it. Here we go. NFC East Mixtape is great. Repeating the title. Like that's also written in the review. It's not just the title. Also shout out to RJ for powering through an episode while sick. I really was sick last week. Like that was the beginning of it. And it lasted like 4 days. It was wild. But anyway, one of my favorite folk remedies, boil water with garlic, lemon, skin on, cayenne, and honey. You probably won't like it, but neither does bacteria. Also, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, some Pennsylvania geography. Also, some Pennsylvania geography info. The Appalachian Mountains run diagonally southwest to northeast through PA. Philly and Harrisburg, home of the esteemed Mr. Parsons, are on the east side of the range, while Pittsburgh is on the west side. Mountains aren't very tall, but travel is difficult enough that there is pretty significant cultural/accent difference. That's the review. Is that true in your experience?
I don't really know. I can't really speak to Harrisburg as much. I'm not from out that way. I will say, I was just thinking when you brought up Micah Parsons, is there a Micah Parsons curse? Because he wore the Tyrese Maxey jersey, he's a Sixers fan, and the Sixers lost. He wore the Phillies jersey, went to the Phillies game. He actually won the games they went to, but in the bigger picture, they didn't achieve the goal. Phillies lost the World Series, and then Micah Parsons was seen in Boston repping the Celtics, trying to distance himself very transparently so from the Sixers, and then the Celtics lost. So, and then the Cowboys don't win anything. So maybe there's some bad luck going on with Micah Parsons.
I will say I've learned, obviously know a great deal of information about Micah, but I've learned this offseason particularly, like everybody's calling Micah Drake with the like team hopping thing. It's, it's kind of difficult to diffuse that
there is
argument.
some of that
But
there, though. Especially if you
but
look back at his old tweets where he's like,
what?
"My Warriors and my Lakers and my
Well,
Heat," or whatever.
he did have well, and then he obviously goes to a lot of Mavericks games, and so somebody was like, "Dude, you got to pick a team," and he did say a few weeks ago or something like that he, in a joke, like I think he's like leaning into the meme at this point, but he was like, next season I'm picking one team, so it remains to be seen which side will take his allegiance, Denver or Miami. Who knows? Jimmy Butler is a Dak Prescott fan, so maybe that's his in, but who knows? But I wanted to say on that, what I've learned about Micah is he is like what I like about Micah a lot is he's just a big sports fan that happens to be an incredibly talented football player. So he's like obsessed with collecting jerseys. Like you said, he was. Did he have a Phillies jersey? I don't remember on the set. That
Pretty sure he did.
I'm sure he did. Right, that makes sense. So he has a Phillies jersey. He obviously has a Sixers jersey. He in the moment that you're talking about in Boston, he was like asking Jason Tatum for a jersey. Tatum, who's very famously friends with Zeke Elliott, so he does have like these little boys. So it's a winner against Philadelphia, at least.
I mean, like, just look at how he's played in big moments, and he hasn't really.
I mean, how did he play in Game 7 against
Philly? I think that was more. I said this at the time. That was more about like Embiid and Harden not showing up than Tatum really
he had the most points ever in a Game 7.
Tatum was good. If Tatum was good at all, then that series would not have gone to a Game 7.
Anyway,
he was horrendous in that series until
in that video. In that video, Micah's like telling Tatum, he's like, I got to get that. I forget how he said it. He's like, I got to get that 0 jersey. And Tatum's like, I got you. And then like 10 minutes later, Micah has a Tatum jersey on. And then I don't know if you saw this, but he was tweeting with Donovan Mitchell. And he was like,
a lot of losers here.
He was like, oh, well, Donovan Mitchell's a Cowboys fan. So he's at least got that going here. But he was like, he said something like, oh, the one I have on my wall is your Utah one. I need that Cleveland jersey. Like Micah's clearly a jersey collector. That's what I've learned over the course of this offseason so far.
I have a quick review to read from the Bleeding Green Nation podcast side of things. Apple Podcast, leave a 5-star rating review. This comes from username Mexican67, 5 stars, title, You Know What I Mean. And then the body goes on to say, on most shows, RJ throws in the phrase, quote unquote, you know what I mean. I'm often wondering exactly what he means. Can he elaborate more? P.S. Go Birds.
Well, P.S. Go Birds. Or what was the name? Mexican 67?
Mexican 67.
You know what I mean. That's the whole, it's a state of mind. You know what I mean.
You know what I think, I don't know if I've brought this up on the podcast before. You know that like people will say, it's like they always say, and then they say the phrase like that. But it's like, if you do know what they always say, then you wouldn't need to say the phrase. It would be like, well, you know what they say, and then nothing.
Yeah.
Because
I think we're reaching a point of like just like average human intelligence where all these things are like annoying us now. So that's just where we're at.
All right, let's get into the meat of today's show.
We're gonna review the series finale of Succession. Brandon,
that's
what was
right.
Your thoughts?
Haven't watched it at all. I think HBO Max changing to Max is silly, as everyone else does, and that's all I've got.
I saw a meme, and then we can get into this, but so the app changed, and the meme was like somebody staring at their like screen, and it was like, you will have to download the new app, and like the caption said, I would rather sit in silence for 3 hours than download a new app and have to log in again. Like the process of logging in is so arduous. It really is.
I hate logging in.
I hate when you like the worst is when you have to type the information in with the controller. Like, you know what I'm saying? You got to like go to your whole email, and then like some digital keyboards have the like at Gmail, at Hotmail, at Yahoo. You know what I'm saying? Like they can fill that part in. Then you got to like do the shift or whatever, find the symbols, like, and then if you made a typo, like it takes. I just wanted to watch a show. It's really
or like the. Kind of some stuff we have at Vox, like the 2-factor authentication stuff sometimes where I have to like, so I enter my password and then it's like, oh, now I have to go onto my phone, which, might not be right nearby if it's charging somewhere. And then I have to like pull up the app and pull up the code and type it in quickly because they expire, part of the safety measure. So yeah, we're just complaining about stuff portion of the podcast early.
PSA for the
now?
PSA for the 2-factor people, because people use it for different things.
Sure.
I learned this lesson the hard way. I think you remember. I got locked out of my Instagram and Facebook account because I got a new phone, and the authenticator app is not something you like log into. Like the app is tied to your phone. So you have
Yeah.
to be like, if you're going to get a new phone, be very careful to log into the authenticator or whatever before you erase the old phone. That was my
Yeah.
mistake. And
I
we had to get some people involved. Shout out to the, I won't say anonymous, but the ever present Morgan. Morgan's the best.
I know someone who works at Meta if you ever need help in the future. So I
Mark?
guess
Is it Mark?
yeah, it is.
Okay. We are going to keep it NFC East mixtapey here. And this is the Bullish episode. That's what the title is. I famously learned what that word meant while on an episode of the NFC East mixtape. Because I thought bullish meant the opposite of bullish. You taught me, Brandon. Thank you so much, my very good friend. That bullish means when you are high on something. So the opposite of how you feel about the new Max app. You are a believer. You see the truth, and the truth is a positive thing here. Basically, Micah Parsons is bullish on every team in the NBA, it feels like. So that being said, we are going to discuss reasons why we are bullish on every team in the NFC East. And that means next week, Brandon, will be
bearish.
Yeah, which is the opposite, which is what we just
But
said.
we're not going to talk about the Chicago Bears, even though I am bearish on the
Or
Bears.
my dog Bear, who was very loud before we started recording. Thankfully,
Yeah, I'm
he's
not
so
bearish
loud.
on Bear either.
Good. So, okay. I'm not either. His Bear's birthday actually is Sunday.
Happy birthday, pal.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Let him know I said that.
I think this is a good launching point. Recently, Bill Barnwell wrote at the Worldwide Leader about, he ranked, I guess is maybe the best way to put it, off seasons, right? Like the best off seasons to the worst, like versus like based on like how they improved or whatever. It was an interesting exercise. 3 teams in the NFC East were in the top 4. So
Pretty
75% of the top 4 was the NFC East. And it was not the 75% that was a part of the divisional round last year on the NFC side of things. This isn't the order we're going in, obviously, but just to kind of, I guess, set the stage. Number 1 was the Washington Commanders. And, Barnwell even mentioned that this is really about the change in ownership.
Yeah, but
right?
it's true. I saw that at first and I'm like, wait, what? And I was like, oh, yeah, duh. That's true.
The line that I think is notable here is all of this is about what happened. Oh, no, hang on. I glossed past the line. You can make a reasonable case that no team made a more significant move to aid their chances of becoming a Super Bowl contender this offseason than the Commanders did by beginning to extricate themselves from their disastrous ownership group. It truly is the example of the bar is so low. You know what I'm saying? The length in which they have cleared the bar is the biggest because their bar was lower than any team in the NFL.
I don't think it's arguable. It just is. Because again, they had with Dan Snyder, it's as simple as we've said many times before. With Dan Snyder, they had 0% chance of ever having sustained success. With any other owner, they have a non-zero chance. So that's automatically a big upgrade.
Winning percentage prior to Dan Snyder in basically the Super Bowl era, 58%. With Dan Snyder, 43%. They had 16 playoff wins before Dan Snyder. They have 2 in the Dan Snyder era. No MVPs, no Super Bowl wins, obviously. Not even a single MVP vote. They had 98 MVP votes prior to Dan Snyder. Again, we say this all the time because I know we have some younger listeners. There was a time where Washington was like this bad team, the good bad. It was a difficult thing when your team had to play them. They were a force to be reckoned with, and that hasn't been the case for a long time, obviously.
Their ceiling with Dan Snyder was a playoff win, maybe you could have a good year here and there, sure, but you were never going to be able to actually win a championship or again have any kind of sustained run of success.
Number 3 on his list. Number 2 was the Miami Dolphins. That was the non-NFC East team. And I do think they are kind of hiding a little bit in plain sight, even though they're at every Heat game. It feels like so. We'll see a lot of them in the coming weeks. But number 3 was the Cowboys. And a big reason why was the acquisitions of Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks. I do want to discuss what he said when we get to the Cowboys, but just laying this out. And number 4 was the Eagles. The Giants were all the way down at 29, which is really insane when you consider that I'm less bearish on Daniel Jones than you and many other people, but that you would be 29th of 32 teams when you handed out a franchise quarterback contract really says something.
I was surprised to see them that low. I don't know they've had an amazing offseason, but I don't think they also had a disastrous. Although it all comes down to I guess whether you believe in Daniel Jones or not.
Right.
But I think that's still a little bit harsh.
Then let's start with the Eagles. I don't know that we have a number, but reasons we are bullish on them. Should I go first? I think that makes sense for me to go first.
Yeah, I don't know it's about a specific number, but yes, go ahead.
Well, they're the reigning NFC champions. They had a billion sacks last year. If there is regression to the mean, they were so far, like they
Yeah.
were on one end of the spectrum that regression to the mean would literally be the mean. You know what I'm saying? And so if you're at the mean, you're still, that's pretty like solid stuff. And if you're at the mean and, plus minus things go your way on average, I mean, it works out for you. I mean, I have some reasons to be bearish too, again, just, for next
Well,
week,
yeah, we'll
which I
get to
think will
those
be
next week.
interesting. But Jalen Hurts exists, obviously. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, the draft, all the Georgia stuff, the Alabama stuff, whatever. Like, it is still one of the most talented rosters in the NFL that, while a teeny tiny purge did happen, did not get completely and totally picked apart the way a lot of teams who play in the Super Bowl do. So, I mean, you're returning the nucleus of a very, very, very good team. That is really the main and primary reason for me, but it's a very solid one in my mind.
I wrote down 5 different things. They're not all in depth, but just like kind of 5 things that came to mind. So I'll hit those real quick. I think, best quarterback in the NFC. And if at the very worst, like second best quarterback in the NFC.
That
And
applies to our first two teams here, obviously, which is a good thing. Like, and it
the
makes
drop
the
off,
rivalry fun.
yeah, and the drop off between the top 2 to the like third or anything else is significant. So at the very least, one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the NFC, and then one of the top whatever in the NFL as a whole. That's number 1. Number 2, still very strong in the trenches. They lost Javon Hargrave, but I mean, you added Jalen Carter, you added Nolan Smith, and you still have Hassan Reddick, and you still have Brandon Graham, and Fletcher Cox returned. I'm not like crazy about that, but there's worse options to have.
Jason Kelce didn't retire.
Jason Kelce didn't retire. They lost Isaac Sumalo, but Cam Jurgens is coming off the bench. They drafted Tyler Steen. They have options there. It's not like they're hopeless there. And even if that spot isn't like amazing, you'll still like sign up for the rest of the offensive line, very much so. So they're still strong in the trenches. That's number 2. Number 3, might actually have a defensive coordinator who like can have a prayer against a good quarterback. Yet remains to be seen. But Jonathan Gannon, who is certainly not like aged well thus far in Arizona, is gone. So I like that. Number 4, I think the ceiling for running back is better. Miles Sanders had a good year last year, but I think many would be able to argue that Penny and Swift, the ceiling of those players, while they might both not hit, and it's possible none of them hit, the ceiling, I think, has been raised at running back. And lastly, I know this is a lot to react to. They actually have the easiest schedule in the NFC East, according to projected win totals.
Because they're not playing themselves. Like, that's the difference between them
13th,
and any other team in the NFC East.
Whereas the Cowboys are 18th, the Giants are 19th, and Washington is all the way down. Even though they had a quote-unquote last place schedule, Washington actually has the hardest schedule at 24th. Certainly the Eagles being good is factoring in there. But still, I just think...
the other teams being good for Washington as well. Like, they have to, like, the
Sure.
6 games are against 3 teams in the divisional round.
Yes, but I do want to point out, like, because there's just so much that was said about, the Eagles have the toughest schedule in the NFL by strength of schedule. I've said it consistently, like, strength of schedule is dumb. Like, give me projected win total over that.
I don't think it's dumb. I mean, I think but it shouldn't be like your driving thing. You know what I'm saying?
It's less meaningful than projected win total. Absolutely, it is.
But I think that they both have value. But if you're marrying the two to come up with some sort of like hybrid, that's the overall goal. Because you can't just dismiss like who every team was last year. Like, it has some value. But
I'm not saying it's an easy schedule. I just don't think it's like this impossible schedule that you would maybe some are making it out to be because of the hardest strength of schedule thing.
No, but I mean, again, I like the statement like, oh, well, the Commanders have the hardest schedule. Again, it's like really obvious why. Like, because every team in their division was in the playoffs and, won double. Well, how many games did the Giants win? 10, right? Last year. So, yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
I think it was they had the tie.
Oh, you're because they had the tie against the Commanders.
7-1.
I think all that is well said. I mean, the quarterback thing is huge. You didn't mention it, but like on my list was they didn't get destroyed at corner. Like, I feel like that's been, and you correct me if I'm wrong, like as it relates to the Cowboys, like for the last, I don't know, like call it like 7-8 years, it's been this matter of like, how is Amari Cooper, if you're an Eagles fan, like how is Amari Cooper beating us? How is CeeDee Lamb beating us? Like we just do not have the corners to like cover these dudes. And so like if there had been this exodus at that position, I do think there could have been some like regression to those times. And I do think that while there might be some regression for Bradbury and or Darius Slay, like you still have two at the worst, very solid cornerbacks to work with and kind of patrol your defense. The Chauncey Gardner-Johnson departure, whatever, it's a safety. You kind of figure that out. I think one of the biggest things, like one of the biggest wins for the Eagles in the offseason is the rugby play was not outlawed. Like that's like a big deal.
Sure.
And something that really kind of helps the Eagles. Like I'm not saying it takes them from like it adds a
Yeah.
win to their
I still think
overall.
they would have been really good at sneaks even if they can't push because their offensive line is very good, and so
But they
was their
can,
quarterback.
like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so even it, like, it would have hindered them, call it 1% or a fraction
Sure.
of a percent, but 0% is less than that. That's my point. So, and they have an aggressive mindset in a lot of ways, like in a coaching way, in a roster management way. So yeah, I mean,
Best
like,
coach in the division, is that fair to say?
no, like,
Why?
I
Who's the
don't
best
think
coach
that's,
in the division?
I mean, I would say
You
it's
have to
Mike
say one.
McCarthy. I would say
Oh
it's
my
Mike
gosh.
McCarthy.
Okay.
Nick Sirianni has been a head coach for 3 seasons, right? And he's been to a Super Bowl, right? Like, I'm not saying he's bad, but like we discount who Mike McCarthy is for a lot of reasons. Like, it's ridiculous to me, like that you would say that Nick Sirianni is better than him at
I
this
mean,
point.
he
But
surpassed their projected win total in both of his first seasons. He's
okay,
overachieved.
they have also played had the benefit, like the Cowboys have, of playing the Commanders and the Giants that were rebuilding. That's a fair thing to say.
Okay.
And
Also works against McCarthy.
he's lost more to McCarthy than he's won. Nick Sirianni has. So, I mean, that doesn't matter either. So, head-to-head matchups favor McCarthy between the two of them. But anyway, I think that I agree with
Wait,
you.
what? Like 2-1?
Well, the 2020 was the first. No, not 2020, but 2021 was a sweep
We're
for
not counting the
Dallas.
last game in week 18. That's not a real game. They weren't
Okay, well
trying.
then it's still 2-1.
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
but it's
so
okay. One game.
okay, well it's more. Like he's won more head to head, and
Okay.
it's like, and he's never lost to Nick Sirianni at home, Mike McCarthy.
So you're putting
So
Sirianni second behind McCarthy?
yeah,
Or
I
are
mean,
you
and
putting Dable over him?
I'm using McCarthy's like Green Bay era and tenure to evaluate who he
Mm.
is as a coach, the same way other people do with other coaches, like the same way Broncos fans do with Sean Payton. Like if Sean Payton was the coach of the Cowboys, I think like this is a separate take, but like I think Sean Payton won by not getting the Cowboys job because Sean Payton still gets the like hype without the like tear down that comes from working for the Cowboys. You know what I'm saying?
And he doesn't
Uh,
have to not advance in the second round.
anyway, but yeah, I would go McCarthy, Sirianni, Dable. Well, no, yeah, Rivera. Rivera's just
It's
been so bad. Like it's hard to defend anything. I felt that way for a long time though, so I'm a little bit biased against Rivera, but I will fully admit that. But this is about the Eagles. I agree that the ceiling with the floor rather, is higher in the running back room. Third year
I'd say the
Devontae Smith.
it's higher. I'd say the floor is lower.
I think the floor is higher. I think the
Mm,
ceiling is maybe the same. You know what I mean?
mm.
But I think the floor is higher. I think Devontae Smith, you got third year wide receiver. That's a common rule of thumb. Like breakout year coming. Like maybe this is the year where Devontae becomes like the dude and AJ's just like an awesome second dude. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean there are a lot of reasons to believe. Hassan Reddick in another year. I mean, yeah, the infusion of draft talent. Like I think Javon Hargrave being gone isn't like a good thing. Like obviously, like you'd rather have him than not have him, but like if it opens the door for possibilities and development of other players, like that is a good thing. So even the bad things weren't like terrible for this team. Is I guess the point.
Yeah, I don't think they lost anyone where they don't have some kind of plan behind them. It's not just like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what do we do here? And there are teams like that in situations like that they're able to get again, like Jalen Carter or have N'Kobe Dean in house, so he's ready to take over for one of the linebacker spots. You know, those guys are projections. I don't know that they're going to be amazing, but at least you have like something that you can feel optimistic about, as opposed to like again, there are teams with very tenuous situations where you're trying to like string things together with duct tape and glue.
Do we have any other bear or bullish reasons? This is still a difficult subject for me, or do we want to move on?
We can move on.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. The Dallas Cowboys. I would like you to go first. I went first for the Eagles, so actually, you
Yeah,
should go
I think
first.
it's the easiest one is Dak interception regression. He was at a 1.7 interception percentage in the first 6 seasons of his career, and he was at 3.8 last year. So it's a very more than double of what he was in the past, and obviously he'll be healthier in terms of not his hand not being injured. So I definitely think. I mean, that number is just going to come down. So that alone is a really big factor.
When it comes down, because like that's just the way like math works, right? Like we're talking like regression to the mean. Like regression to the mean happens in positive ways. But when that number comes down, there will be takes like this like late October, mid November, like what is Dak doing differently? And it's like sometimes there are just outliers. Like
Nothing.
like it's just life. It's just gravity. I agree with you. I think the low hanging fruit I thought was the Gilmore and Brandon Cooks acquisitions.
I have
Like,
number 2 on my list.
I mean, if you compare the aggression of roster building relative to last year. Last year, we killed the Cowboys, maybe you and I, but like we, the collective, for 3 specific things. Do you remember what they were over the offseason?
What offensive tackle? Tyron, just counting on Tyron. No real backup plan other than like Josh Ball, maybe.
You've gotten. I'll give you credit for that one. That's one.
And then Amari, obviously,
Right. That's
and
two.
then backup quarterback.
No, the third was the way the Randy Gregory thing happened, because there
Oh,
was the like
okay,
clause in the contract.
sure.
So the trading away of Amari, it wasn't just the Tyron thing. Like the reason I gave you credit though was because it was about the tackle position, but
Hmm.
they cut Lyle Collins and they seemingly had no real
Yeah,
plan. Now that it worked out and Tyler Smith was amazing, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, that looked really suspect on paper, and it blew up in their face at the final week of training camp or final week of the preseason before the regular
yeah.
season started, or it was 2 weeks before, whatever. When Tyron got hurt, and they were really up a creek. And then the Randy Gregory thing, and they drafted like their first 3 picks in the draft were Tyler Smith, Sam Williams, Jalen Tolbert, which directly replaced their tackle need, their pass rusher need, and their wide receiver need. But they didn't draft for need, and it worked out. But again, those things were really dumb. So this is the exact opposite of that, right? Like, okay, we need help at corner. Let's trade for Stephon Gilmore. Let's add that veteran. We're not super comfortable with where we are at wide receiver, which we learned not only throughout the season, but with the T.Y. Hilton and Odell stuff, obviously late in the year. So we're going to trade for Brandon Cooks. Like they have addressed pre-holes, you know what I'm saying, which is a great breath of fresh air. It's something they haven't done in a very long time. One of our writers, Danny Phantom, he verified this as best as he could. So I don't know if this is 100% true, but I believe this is the first time ever that the Cowboys are starting a season with 3 receivers who have eclipsed 1,000 yards in their career. So you got CD, Brandon Cooks, and Michael Gallup. Not that you get a trophy for that, but my point is like they've bought established things instead of like buying things that are unknown and hoping for the best. They have hedged their bet, which has been nice to see. So that's my point on Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I put the address big positions of weakness, and then I kind of lumped in Mozzie Smith in there too, because that was
Mm-hmm.
obviously which I do think, which is kind of my criticism or concern or worry about the pick, is that I wonder how much it was just an immediate short term kind of thing with the idea you're just going to fix the run defense with him. And, I think that's a lot of pressure on one player and a rookie alone at that. Not to say you can't help, but just like, I don't know that it's a solution, just that one guy. So, but still, there was a vision in mind. And I think between Cooks, Gilmore, and Mozzie Smith, those guys have the potential to be difference makers for the Cowboys.
I would also add reasons to be, or like to the reasons to be bullish list. I have 2. Dan Quinn did not leave, right? Like we
Sure.
were like, oh man, like definitely happening. It didn't happen last year. It's absolutely going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. So Dan Quinn did not leave. And along those same lines, now Barnwell was not a fan of this in the write up that we mentioned, but a lot of Cowboys fans are. They moved on from Kellen Moore, so that does have a division among Cowboys fans. Like some people, I mean, you know how that is. Like, I don't know that there's like an Eagles fan standing for Jonathan Gannon, but I'm sure
No.
I'm sure before the Super Bowl, at least, there were some people who maybe a small sector who were like, he's better than we think. And then obviously he lost everyone then. But you know how that can be, right? Like some people are like, he stinks. Some people are like, no, he's really great. Like whatever, whatever, whatever. So depending on who you ask, that's another reason.
Yeah, well, I'll get to Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy in the Bearish episode. For
Oh, we're doing
now,
a lot of teasing.
well, that's next week's episode. For this week's episode, I have Eagles take a step back. This is the Cowboys section, so I think I can be bearish on the Eagles a little bit in this section.
Oh, interesting. Baking in. Okay.
Well, with the context that it's like said every episode, no repeat winner since
Right.
2004. So that's obviously it's not even just about the Eagles; it's about the
That
division as a
lends to the
whole.
Cowboys' advantage, you're saying.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like it's absolutely relevant because it's not something you can. I know it's like a trivia thing and not necessarily predictive, but it's just true though. It's like, how could you possibly go into the season being like, yes, the Eagles are definitely going to win the division? Like, no, you can't say that. You can't just say they're definitely going to do it. Again, it's really hard to do.
I think so. This is Super Bowl 58, right? This year.
Yep.
So like we're going on 19 years, right? If the Eagles don't win the division in this year in 2023, it will be 19 years in a row that a singular team has not repeated as an NFC East champion, right? Because the last time was 2004, so it was 19 years ago. And so I guess it's been 19 years, but whatever. I don't want to get into the like Eagles two years. Yeah, no, I don't want to do that. But my point is like, it's not just like a 5-year sample size. Like we're talking literally a third. Like I'm rounding here, but like a third of NFL Super Bowl era history here. Like that is basically the 21st century. Like I realize I'm cutting a little bit off, but like it is an extraordinary amount of time. It's not just like a drop in the bucket.
It's also like indicative of volatility in the NFL. That's how the NFL is. They're just like, you have good years, you have bad years. Sometimes they're really hard to predict. It's not as simple as you just win the division year in and year out, unless you're like the Chiefs. But again, that's not the norm. That is more so the exception.
I agree. Like there's the unicorn that comes along every once in a while. The Patriots are like the unicorn of unicorns. The Chiefs are like a baby unicorn at this point. But I agree. Other reason I would add to be bullish, Michael Gallup had the torn ACL season last year. There's many people who say, again, it depends on like what you want to believe. A lot of, medical experts and injury experts say like it takes you a full year, you know what I mean, to recover. And he was very clearly not himself. I don't think that's like, up for debate last year. So there would be hope that there would be regression in that sense, regression to who he used to be prior to the injury, which occurred, I don't know if you recall, in January of 2022. So you've got that working out in your favor. And I don't like, being mean like this. You have less of a problem with it than I do, but Zeke is gone, right? Like Zeke hindered the offense to a large degree. That's not to say he didn't have his value, didn't have his place, didn't have his worth, but he did hinder the offense in a lot of ways. And so kind of like if you're somebody who believes Kellen Moore's departure is a good thing for the offense, Zeke's departure is a good thing in a number of different ways as well.
Side point here, tangent on the mention of the Chiefs and winning the division, and maybe this is something you can bring up to our good friend Pete Sweeney in the future. I don't think it gets talked about enough how much of an advantage it is that they had 2 relocations between the Chargers and the Raiders. Like that's a big deal because like you're moving
within this
away
era.
Yeah, you're moving away from like these passionate, or at least more so relative to the new place, passionate fan bases. So you're weakening the crowds at 2 different road stadiums. Like that's a really big advantage, especially when the Chargers have like no fan base at all. Like that's kind of a really nice thing to have, I have to say.
I reached a point where I like had a little bit of a bitterness towards the Chiefs, like I think everybody did, and you have one now for
this has nothing
reasons.
to do with the Super Bowl.
No.
I
But
was not like
I'm saying
that
like
the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Like
you
good for them.
remember you and I and Stats talking about this. Like we all had a little bit of like Chiefs attrition, again prior to the Super Bowl, and then I do think that they kind of broke through all that, but like. So I would have argued this a lot back then, but like there is some merit to that. I really think it really also puts in
big
perspective.
Advantage.
Right. Well, it also puts in perspective how pathetic the Broncos have been. That like they haven't been able to like remotely capitalize on that.
Right.
But I actually brought this up to Pete. He didn't know Andy Reid has won. I don't know if you heard this. He's won as many, like they've won as many division titles in the Andy Reid era as they had all time before he arrived. That's insane. But to your point, that's also capitalizing on the weakness around you.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take credit away from the Chiefs. I'm just saying that's a nice like little thing to have in your back pocket as a bonus. Like that certainly helps. And that goes towards like the recipe for success there.
Right.
So there you go.
Michael Gallup coming back, Micah Parsons in year 3, the team having you can go bullish and bearish on certain subjects, I think, which we'll find out next week, obviously. Whatever Dan Quinn or Micah are going to say publicly or not, the like seemingly full-time commitment to Micah Parsons as a pass rusher is a good thing. I would also add they did not lose Leighton Vander Esch and Donovan Wilson, kind of like we talked about Darius Slay and James Bradbury for the Eagles. Like those were departures we were really worried about on the Cowboys side of things. And the fact like that's why like when that happened in free agency, we were almost all kind of like, we're good. And then they traded for Stephon Gilmore and it was like, holy crap. And then they traded for Brandon Cooks and it was like, this is nirvana. So retaining both Vander Esch and Donovan Wilson was a big thing.
That's all I had.
Well, then let's take a break and hear a word from our sponsors. Welcome back. While we were gone, Brandon, you gave me some some positive words that I have needed. Do you remember why?
Positive words that you needed. I think I said that phrase that I mentioned earlier. You know what they always say?
Well, I'm actually really nervous because
Why?
I don't know if I told you this. The weekend of the draft, the Friday night after Friday night of the draft, we had this massive rainstorm here. And I don't need to get into the specifics, but the storm damaged part of my pit boss, my smoker, my pellet grill. And so I had to get a part replaced. And
Mm.
it has been a big thing. They've been really great, the customer service team, but like it got lost and they had to send a second one. So it's supposed to arrive actually like right after I get done recording with you. And there's some installation involved. And they did send me the instructions, and I'm so, because it's been since the draft, like I'm so like anxious for food off of it. You know what I'm saying? But I'm really nervous that I'm not going to be able to install it properly. And I told you that during the break, and you said, "You got it, man. I believe in you. I love
That
you."
sounds
Those were
like
your
me.
exact
That
words.
sounds exactly like how I talk. So I think the listeners believe it too.
The New York good once again at football Giants. One of us has got to go first on the Giants. One of us has got to go first on the Commanders. Because I'm a good friend, I'll let you pick which one you want.
Well, I went first last time, so why don't you go first this time?
Again, there's some, you know, glass half full, glass half empty perspective here, but they kept Daniel Jones. And I do think that that is a reason to be bullish, because had he left, what would they have done? I'm actually seriously asking you that. Like, what would they have? Jimmy Garoppolo would have been the plan with his like weird contract. You know what I mean? That was the talk of the weekend. You know what I mean? Like, what would have been the like
Could have
what
made a play for Lamar, but not like a guarantee because
that
of
wouldn't have
the
happened in all
yeah.
likelihood. You know what I mean? Like, would they have like traded for Russell Wilson? You know what I mean? Like, would it have been Derek Carr? You know what I mean? Like, none of those things, like, plus the cost involved, would have been worth it in my mind. So they were able to keep Daniel Jones. They were able, or they did not pay Saquon. That's a big positive for me as far as like being bullish on them overall. They added weapons. They traded for Darren Waller. They drafted Jalen Hyatt. They signed Paris Campbell. Like, they have a fully competent, like when they huddle up, it's a group of competent NFL players. I cannot say that that has been the case for a long time. And they will have stronger development from some of their significant contributors. You've mentioned Evan Neal a bunch of times. Kayvon
Mhm.
Thibodeau, who we've talked about in different ways, like from just a football perspective, will be an absolutely better player next season. I was a big fan of the Bobby Okereke signing. I know that you were not, but still, I mean, like, and they have not made any panic moves. Like, Adoree Jackson kind of wants out. They're like, okay, dude, well, you can play one final season with us, and then we'll move on. Like, they're becoming a shrewd football operation, which is a good thing to see.
I put three different things. Number one is Daniel Jones has his best supporting situation ever, right? It has
Are
to
you all
be.
right? You sick like
Yeah.
I was?
Sorry. No, a froggy throat, if you will. They added Darren Waller. I like Jalen Hyatt a lot as a dynamic weapon. Excuse me.
People
Here, why
people
don't you
thought
rip for
he'd
a little bit?
be just to buy you some time to clear your throat. People thought Jalen Hyatt would be the like number one receiver draft. Like if you had asked somebody in the middle of November, you know what I mean? Like they would have been like, I remember like people would talk like, oh, maybe Jalen Hyatt will make it to the Cowboys. They're like, there's no way. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I know a lot of things happen, but still, like that player is still there.
Yeah. And again, I don't know about Jalen Hyatt volume wide receiver, but I do absolutely believe in Jalen Hyatt, like Deshaun Jackson
Mm-hmm.
element where he's just like this problematic deep threat that everyone has to deal with. And whether that's him actually making big plays or opening things up underneath for the Giants, which they had a lot of success underneath with Daniel Jones and kind of limiting the turnovers like we talked about. Yeah, I definitely think this is the best supporting cast. You'd already touched on it with Evan Neal, who we talked about last week in our what was that step
I don't remember. I
leap
blacked out because I
forward or
was sick.
step back? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so there's that, and I also think that I think Dable has a case for second best head coach in the division. Obviously, we
Oh
disagree
my
on that, but he's
god.
well,
He's
all right.
better than Nick Sirianni is the
You can
case, right?
disagree about that, but you can't disagree. Like he had a good season last year. He seems like he's a good coach. Seems like he knows what he's doing, and the coaching staff continuity. They didn't really lose anyone when there was, talk that they could lose Wink Martindale. You interviewed for at least one job. Mike Kafka interviewed for multiple jobs. And I point to the Eagles from last year with this. The Eagles didn't lose like any other coaching. They didn't even touch their coaching staff, basically, going from 21 to 22, 2022. And that doesn't mean the Giants are going to have the same level of success. But I do think there can be value in continuity. So they have that going for them. And the last thing I wrote down is what you already touched on as well with Thibodeau. I think he could be like, one of these second-year players who could make a big jump.
To your coaching point, if we look at the 3 playoff teams, which again excludes the Commanders, obviously, they're the only one who didn't see any coaching change. Now, granted, the Cowboys' change was purposeful, right, in moving on from Kellen Moore, and the Eagles was opportunity based on the head coaching opportunities for Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. But they didn't lose. I mean, and that's sometimes the weird. It's almost like, I mean, it's like when teams tank, right? It's like if you can't win the Super Bowl, you want to, you want the better opportunities, you wanted the higher draft pick, whatever. So like if you can't win the Super Bowl, you want your coordinators to return in this weird hypothetical. But that worked out for them. I think the Dable thing is also like a reason to be bullish on them. Like year 2, like if that was year 1, like what happens when he has a full year, like, and he doesn't, they don't have all this going on. And I think that applies to the team as a whole, the culture, et cetera, but also specifically to Daniel Jones. I'm not, saying, oh man, what are his MVP odds, over at DraftKings? But like he is with the Brian Dable bump, like he is a stable quarterback. He's like, when you play a video game and you get like armor or something like that, and it like takes your defense up from like a level 5 to like level million. Like that's what Brian Dable is for Daniel Jones. Like without him, his defense is like level, like, which is ironic, is level 5, but like with it, it's level 1 million. So I think that's a good thing. And again, I mean, they have not. What is the stupid thing they've done? I know some people would say paying Daniel Jones, but like they didn't bring Odell in. They didn't, pay Saquon. Like they have graduated from those sorts of things. I mean, think about it. Like they have become like, so Joe Shane deserves a lot of credit too here. Now I know you know and agree with that, but it's not just Brian Dable.
I think there could be something to the Giants believing in themselves, actually, too. They're not coming into the season like, oh, we're the Giants. We're literally last season, as we talked about many times too. Them and the Jets entered the league as the 2 worst teams in the league since 2017. So you kind of have that stench, and there has to be some kind of human psychology stuff going on there where like we lose a lot. That's what we do, and it stinks, but like this is kind of who we are. But now they actually had a season like, okay, we made some progress. We actually believe we can win some of these games, and that doesn't like supersede everything. You have to be talented. You can't just have belief, but I think belief is part of the equation, and I think they might have more of that now than they ever had. So I think, again, if you're looking for optimistic cases, is that they come into the season feeling like, hey, we can make some noise. It's not about like, hey, is this going to work? Are we still losers? It's like, no, we're like a decent team.
I agree with your human psychology point. Also, from the perspective of like, obviously you're coming off of not just a playoff season, but a playoff win. I mean, like all those things help and boost your, kind of vibe. But beyond that, like, remember when they were 7-3, we were like, that's it. It's over. Like they're about to fall apart. Like that did not happen. You know what I mean? Like you have, it's not
in a
just
situation where it could have, because they got screwed with the Commanders had like that bye coming off. The Commanders played them in twice that had all that extra time to prepare, and at FedEx Field too.
Yeah. And so like it's not just a matter of like we believe we're not that anymore. It's like, no, we literally proved that we're not that anymore. And so it's like I think of like, I don't know, like things all the time. It's like when you have like your first year at a job, like everything is like your first time, whatever. So like it's actually like your second time where you're like, oh, well, it's no longer my first. Like it's no longer like my first this, my first that, whatever. So like they're past all the firsts. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a good and a liberating thing for them. And that they're past all the firsts with all these accomplishments under them already, I think is really great. And I think a big point, for them in their favor is a bit of a bullish point, on the Cowboys. But your point about the Eagles, right? Like there's regression maybe coming for the Eagles, the 20-year thing, whatever. And for the Cowboys, it's like, well, they can't have a billion takeaways another year in a row, right? Like if regression comes for the top 2 teams in the division, like the door is well swung open for the Giants to win it. Like I predicted a year ago when we did our 4-way show, and everybody laughed at me. None of y'all believed the way I did, and y'all are stupid.
You said you regretted
smart.
That after the fact.
I never said that,
and you totally did get swept up in the moment when we were on the podcast, and you also admitted that to that. But I do think, to what you're talking about for real, it's confidence. Like confidence is a real thing. They have earned the right to have some confidence, and it might serve them not at all. Like again, it's not. There's a lot of things that have to fall into place, but it could be meaningful. I do think it could be of value.
And I think the Jets are like, I know we're not talking about the AFC East, but like I think they're a good team, and I think they'll be better obviously this year. But like the 2 New York teams, or the New York title teams, they have 2 different types of confidence to me. Like you said it, like the Giants' confidence is completely earned. You know what I'm saying? The Jets' confidence is completely and totally just like hope. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't have the career accomplishments of Aaron Rodgers. Like just because he wears your uniform now and is like on your team, like you're not the same as the Giants. The Jets aren't. Like, you have to prove that first, and then Brandon and RJ will respect you at least. So
All right, let's move on to the Commanders. If you're done with the Giants,
set the table. You can do this. I believe in you.
I mean, obviously, we already, like, Snyder being gone, we already covered that, so I'm not going to say that. It's very obvious. I can say that really quickly. Unlike every other NFC East team, I wrote here, I have 4 things for the Commanders. Number 1 is, unlike every other NFC East team, not facing the pressure of expectation, because there's a lot of pressure on the other teams. The Eagles coming off the Super Bowl, Cowboys like having to get over the hump and being right there and kind of maybe being perceived as the favorites because of the lack of repeat winner. And then the Giants having gone from being bad to being good. If there's any kind of struggle, it's going to be like, oh no, same old Giants. So with the Commanders, they're kind of just, I mean, that's kind of the luxury of people thinking you're bad, is that there aren't a lot of expectations. So you kind of aren't facing that. Obviously, Rivera is facing pressure in terms of being a lame duck coach or whatever, or kind of on closer to his way out. But as a whole, like, if the Commanders are bad, it's not going to be people are shocked. So I think there is something to that in terms of playing loose and feeling like, hey, no one gave us a shot. We can sneak up on people. Whereas other teams in this division, I think, have more of a target on them. And it's like, oh, we have to bring our A game because we're playing these teams that made the playoffs last year, where it's like, oh, the Commanders, like, we can take them for granted. That'll be an easy game. So I do think they have that in their favor.
I think that's really fair to say. They're kind of like the youngest sibling in a family where everybody has struggled, right? And so it's kind of like, well, you know, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? The bar is low. Like, nobody can really do anything, whatever. Like, just kind of hang on. I think is maybe the best way to put it.
They're going to be underestimated.
Right. And I mean, like the same point you made about the Cowboys, about the Giants. I mean, that we brought up, or the same point you made when we talked about the Cowboys, and then I brought up when we talked about the Giants, is true here, right? The attrition to the entire division. Like, you're not going to be in a division that has 3 playoff teams again, in all likelihood, right? Like, especially this one, right? That, we talked about the 2004 thing. My biggest one, like, outside of the Snyder thing, is this was a very good football team. Like, in like relative to context. Like, do you remember what their highest, like, let's say highest, but like their like highest point was, like, when we were talking about them, like the whole division potentially making it, what their record was?
No.
They were 7-5. They were 7-5, and then the tie with the Giants happened. So they fell to 7-5-1, and then the bye week, and then they lost to the Giants, and then they lost to the Niners because the Niners didn't fall apart with Brock Purdy like we thought they might. But like, you were 7-5, like, and you were 7-5 with like chaos, you know what I mean? Like, and 7-5 when Carson Wentz started part of your season. So like, similar to like other things, Carson Wentz is gone. Like, you have finally ridded yourself from the bad, vibe or decision or whatever you want to call it. Like, I don't know that I believe in Jacoby Brissett or Sam Howell, but like,
the vibe shift from Wentz to Brissett is huge. That's a
great point
for the locker room. That is massive.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, like no disrespect to Sam Howell, but like, Jacoby Brissett's one of the like most loved dudes in the entire NFL, and
great
so
teammate.
I agree. The Carson thing kind of felt like the last, and maybe it was like appropriate, like Snyder football thing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like
the last, like Albert Hainsworth big decision.
Right, exactly. And so like, you're free of those. You know what I'm saying? Like what is the contract that they have right now that we're like, that's so stupid? You know what I mean? Like, find it. Like, I would challenge you. You know what I mean? They really don't have one. I mean, it's, and who was it? Deron Payne who they tagged, right? Not Jonathan Allen.
Yeah.
So they tagged and they got the deal done. You know what I mean? Like, so you got the deal done despite all of that. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have these weird kind of things hanging out. Terry McLaurin is under contract. Like, you have, the Chase Young thing didn't work out, but you know what? They acknowledged that, right? Like, they didn't hold on. They didn't pick up the 5th-year option. They're no longer living in fantasy land as a football team. Like, that's one part of who this organization is, obviously. So like, all these things point positively for me. Like, and I don't believe in the head coach, but if you want to, take this as a positive thing, like, it's maybe his last year, right? Like, so like, you're maybe almost done with that part of the ride.
And I bet you Commander fans listening to this are like, I can't believe you already haven't mentioned this, which is probably the number one biggest reason for optimism, is Eric Bieniemy. Maybe he is really as good as advertised. I kind of have questions because of how no one has like ultimately kind of wanted him, and that at the time of the Commanders hiring him, I said, like, I think this isn't like necessarily the best signal. Like, he's ending up here of all places. I don't like that. No, that's the best development for Eric Bieniemy's actual stock and outlook. But there's a chance that everyone is right and he does deserve a head coaching job and maybe gets it in Washington. We'll see, depending on how things go. But maybe he is the real deal. I think it's fair to say that the offense wasn't really going places with Scott Turner. So, this has the potential to be a big upgrade. I don't know that Sam Howell could be anything, but I'll put a non-zero chance that he could be something. I mean, he was like a legitimate prospect. Obviously, he didn't finish strong at North Carolina, but at one time he was it's not just this guy out of nowhere.
At one point, people thought he'd be a first-round pick in 2022, right. And so that obviously didn't happen.
There might be something to work with there. I think that's fair to say. I wouldn't bank on that, but it's not like you're drafting, the Eagles drafted Clayton Thorson or or Will Greer, these kind of just it's whatever. That guy's clearly not going to be anything. So I thought Sam Howell was a great value when they drafted him. I thought they got him lower than I thought he would have gone. So I definitely think that's a fair point. And the last thing I'll say here. Defense is talented. If Emmanuel Forbes works out, which I think is a big if, consider he's 166 pounds, it's a good secondary. And I think it's hard to say if Chase Young works out because of that the signal does not seem good on him coming off an injury and everything. But I guess there's a path where he is healthy and he looks great. So the larger point being, they still have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. And for as much as I think Jack Del Rio there's some big question marks there. He's certainly at the very least been able to produce good defenses.
I actually have a question because I don't know that I can think of an example. Do you know, or can you name a time where a first-round player did not have their fifth-year option picked up and then played through their rookie contract, obviously, and then signed with a different team and the original team received a compensatory pick? Can you think of an example of that?
I think that's going to happen with Andre Dillard.
You get what I'm saying? You get the prompt I'm describing.
Yeah, it's not likely, but I think that is going to happen with
Dillard.
Well,
the fact that it's Andre Dillard makes what I'm about to say sound jaded, but it's not. I don't think that should be allowed. If you decline the fifth-year option, you're saying we don't, we're good. You know what I'm saying? We don't believe in a player. So if you, and if you re-sign the player though, because some players this happened with Leighton Vander Esch, they declined his fifth-year option and they brought him back on a 1-year deal. If he had left, I think you should be eligible to get the compensatory pick then, but you shouldn't if you decline the fifth-year option, because by your own admission, you're saying that this player kind of stinks.
The NFL did get rid of a couple of years ago the option thing. I think it used to be, if I'm not mistaken, you could decline not just the fifth-year option, not just other options, other contract, and but then I changed that, I believe. But I think it's still in place with the.
I think the spirit of what I'm saying makes sense though, because why should the Commanders in this case be allowed to reap a potential benefit of Chase Young playing well and leaving and getting paid when they're saying right now we don't believe in him?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Look at me. Hit me up, competition committee. I'll make your lives easier. I would offer my last one. You have Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. You have one of the best receiver pairs in the NFL. That is something that should be said. So maybe, and you have Brian Robinson. You kind of, I wouldn't say stumbled, but you discovered one of the better young running backs in the NFL, and his story is obviously incredible with his recovery. I mean, so there is stuff to work with here. You know what I mean? You got to find your artist. I don't know who that is. Maybe it is Eric Bieniemy.
They need the catalyst, I believe, which is the quarterback should be at least. I think on your Dotson McLaurin point, I don't know. And we'll get into this with our NFC East offense team, specifically with the wide receivers. I don't think they're the best pair in the division, but I think going into any game against the divisional teams and other teams with really good wide receivers, I think it's very possible that Dotson and McLaurin could end that game as the top two receivers in that game. They were the top two guys on that given day.
I agree, but I think part of the reason why they're not the best in the division is because the division has two other really talented pairs. You know what I'm saying?
It's tough. It's a very tough. There's really good receivers in this division.
Would Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson be the best receiver duo in the NFC North?
I don't really know the North.
Maybe no. Well, Justin Jefferson exists, so obviously not. But the NFC South, maybe.
Who are you looking at there? The Falcons.
Tampa. Tampa still exists, and Tampa still, whatever.
Who's Tampa have?
Well, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. That's what I'm saying. It depends how you feel about them now. But they'd be closer at least. Would they be the best? Not the AFC East because of Miami.
And are we going quarterback agnostic here too? Are we factoring in like their production relative to?
No, like you're saying, if you can swap them out, like that's
Yeah.
that's the game. Definitely not the AFC North. Maybe the AFC South. Definitely the AFC South. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know people are bullish on Jacksonville, but like, I think we all want to see Calvin Ridley a little bit. You know what I mean? Before we like really crown them.
Yeah. I mean, he has to reprove himself after being out for a year.
And even the AFC West. Yeah, like if you could make an argument that on any team they'd be the best receiver duo in the AFC West. Like Kansas City doesn't have like a super intimidating duo because Patrick Mahomes exists. It depends how you feel about the Chargers, but like Keenan Allen, I don't know that anybody really is like super high on anymore. Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, like whatever. And the Raiders, like Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow, maybe you think they're better like as a duo. And again, Denver has a lot to prove in a lot of ways. I think they might be the best in the AFC West.
I know I already mentioned the Snyder thing, but I guess another part of that I should have mentioned is kind of like I talked about the Giants. Commanders can now believe now we can be good again. Not necessarily be amazing this year, but like Snyder's gone. So it's like a fresh slate. And maybe, I don't know if this is real, but players could be like more motivated. There's more on the line in the sense like you're trying to impress the new ownership. You want to be part of this new core of a team. You feel like there is hope. The crowd could be better than it's been in a long time. Stadium is still not good, but the crowd could feel like fans could be. I'm sure there's a number of fans who swore off the team with Dan Snyder and like, I'm not going to that stadium until he's not the owner anymore. And I think you'll get. I bet you there's a crowd increase this year. I don't know to the point that it's like the most fearsome play in the NFL, but I bet you it's a better crowd than it's been in a bit. So that's another thing too.
I would also offer last thing, like I'm back to my first year point. Like it's no longer the first everything is the Commanders. And I know that there's some like question about that, but like for now at least, you know what I mean?
Well,
like
for now, because it might change again.
For now,
they should change it again. Get rid of the. Come on.
I think. Well, if you're like I said this, recently here, but like I think Josh Harris, if he's paying $6 billion, should be allowed to name the team what he wants.
Why does he? Yeah, why does he? Unless he just loves that name. Yeah, why would he keep?
Yeah,
it?
like if in this particularly unique situation, he should be allowed to name it what he wants. So
sure.
But
he might have to. Even if he doesn't.
What if he named it the Sixers? Would you be bothered?
I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Why? It's the nation's capital, like 1776.
That's not how that works.
I mean, it's not. It didn't happen
there,
but like
exactly.
I know it didn't happen there, but like it's an equally significant thing, like relative to the country. Like, what is the best name? If we have to pick a name that we want, what do we want it to be
for the Washington team?
Yeah,
I think they should have went with Red Wolves.
Red Wolves would be cool. I would feel less dumb saying Red Wolves than I feel saying Commanders.
Or just the Wolves. Why not just the Wolves?
I'm fine with that. You know what I'm saying? Like I also
that's almost too cool. I almost don't want them to do that because of how good that would be for them. But
I liked the Red Wolves idea because they could include the logo with the R. You know what I'm saying? Like if you can have some connection to the history.
Maybe they need a distance from that though. I think is the thing.
I mean, I get that. And I get they cut the colors, but like this isn't like the Jaguars or the Panthers. Like there is a storied football history here that like that the name Commanders doesn't really acknowledge or whatever.
What about the Wolverines? The Washington Wolverines.
Super fan of that as well. I mean, miss me. I know there's people that are like, I liked the football team. No, it was dumb. I didn't. Did not like that whatsoever. So, yeah, the Washington mixtapes. How about that?
No.
Why?
Does that mean we'd have to root for them?
That would be great SEO for us. So,
yeah, but then I don't know what that means for us at that point.
Okay, last thing, and then we'll get out of here. Ian Rappaport just tweeted, DeAndre Hopkins has hired Kelton Crenshaw of Clutch Sports to represent him in free agency.
Okay, it's not that sketchy guy anymore.
He also represents Chase Young, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Devontae Smith. So a lot. There's a big NFC East flair there.
Yeah, I don't think the Eagles are signing him, by the way, because there's just not enough targets to go around for everyone to be happy, including him.
The Cowboys are the favorite, depending on what sportsbook you look at, and not that really matters or means anything.
I think for the same reason, they are also not going to sign him.
I mean,
it's not Madden. It's not fans. Like guys have egos and they want their targets, and they're not going to be happy. Do you know how many targets per game DeAndre Hopkins averages over his career?
Per game, I would put the over under at like 7.5.
It's like 9.7. Yeah, so he's going to have to take a ridiculously lighter workload if he signs with the Eagles.
But he might. He might have what's his career high in touchdowns? I'm going to guess it's like 13. I'm looking it up right now. I'm gonna
Yeah, but
guess 13.
it's about targets. It's about volume. It's about putting up numbers because that's how you get paid in the
Holy
NFL.
crap, it's 13. Shout out to me. But I mean, I think
It's not happening.
we'll see.
Unless
Then
unless I'm wrong and he just like is willing to take a lesser role, which I think is not really what's going on here. But unless I'm wrong about that, it's not happening. For
if he
either team, to be clear. I'm not like trying to say, oh, it's not only happening for the Cowboys. It's not
if he
happening for the
signs with
Eagles
the
or the
Cowboys or
Cowboys.
Eagles, and like I know people would make this argument about
And the
either team
Giants
to
should sign him.
well, if he signs with the Cowboys or Eagles, and I know people would make this argument to different extents about either team, but if he signs with one of those teams, that's the Super Bowl favorite on the NFC side, like
Oh, it's
without a doubt.
crazy.
Like
Yeah,
you know what I'm
it's
saying? Like
like to be clear, yeah, I'm not saying they shouldn't in terms
right.
of like that'd be awesome, like and then a ridiculously stacked lineup for either side, but like I just don't see it realistically happening because he has a preference too. I'm telling you, he's gonna want to go somewhere where he's gonna get like big time targets, and it's not gonna be in Philly or Dallas.
It's gonna be something like super random. It's gonna just feel boring. Like the I don't know. Like the
Lions would be
Cardinals.
fun.
The Cardinals were that team. Like I remember vividly recording with Pete, and then JJ Watt tweeted out the photo of himself working out with the Cardinals shirt. And we were like, the Cardinals. Like it was
Yeah.
so like flat and boring and whatever.
How
So
about Jimmy Kempski talked about this on the NFC East Mixtape? How about like a lot of
we
people
are
did
the
like
NFC East Mixtape. Jimmy
Zach?
Kempski's never been on the NFC East
Sorry,
Mixtape.
BGN Radio.
That's a sore subject for a lot of people that he's never been on the NFC East
I
Mixtape.
know.
So.
Well, it'll happen. Zach Ertz like wanted to go to the Cardinals, you know what I mean, or at least wanted out of Philly, and now and at the time it was an upgrade, but now it's looking like a big
Well,
time downgrade.
isn't his wife from there? Like from the area? Like and you know what I mean? Like there's some like non-football reasons for him
I
that like
think
make
she's from the West Coast, but still, like you know what I mean. But part of the reason he wanted to get traded is because the Eagles were perceived to be in this teardown mode, and he wanted to go somewhere to win. And now he is looking at maybe the worst team in the NFL
Zach
and
Ertz.
Jonathan Gannon.
Zach Ertz, he definitely dropped that touchdown. But
RJ,
anyway,
no, he didn't. That's just like I called that in the moment. I was like, he took 3 steps, so it doesn't even matter. And also, he recaught the ball in the end
it
zone.
was it was a touchdown. But I remember like vividly
He
thinking
took
like
3 steps.
I know. Look, to be clear, it was a touchdown. But my thought in the moment was like, I hate that like this is like a thought that I have. You know what I'm saying? That like this is not that this isn't like plain as day obvious. Like I hate that. But anyway,
I was never worried. I was like, that's like I saw it live. I said he had 3 steps into the Ryan Van Bibber. Shout out to former SB Nation writer who was sitting next to me at the time, and I was like, that's definitely a touchdown. Anyway,
what was your question? So we can get out of here.
RJ, I want to hear 3 songs people should listen to. I was also thinking potentially if you don't have 3, you could do one, I could do one, and then maybe Rachel can throw one at the end.
Oh, I like that.
Like
Okay, so
Rachel, if you're listening to this, you can throw that in at the end with your because she's not here for the listeners. She can add it in post.
In the spirit of that, Rachel, I can't tell you everything because you're not a part of Monday Football Monday, so we have like our own special jokes. But part of it involves the Spice Girls. Jeremy Reisman knows what I'm talking about. And Rachel has a connection to the Spice Girls, so I'm gonna go with "Stop" by the Spice Girls. That's my answer.
I'm gonna say "Reptilia" by the Strokes.
Ooh, great! Like beginning. That's a great call. Wow. What do we think? We can't guess Rachel's. It's impossible.
I can't guess. I don't want to like lead her a certain way either. Okay. Anything Rachel wants to pick, and it is your homework, listeners, to listen to all those and give your feedback
in the order that we went to.
In the
so
order,
Stop, and Reptilia, and then Rachel song TBD.
And use hashtag
songs.
No, you can't pick something so generic because then it gets lost in the shuffle. You
hashtag mixtape songs.
There you go. Hashtag.
Actually, that's probably
that's not good
really
either,
generic. Yeah.
Yeah. Hashtag mixtape. Listen along.
And maybe if you really want to like get in the vibe of what everything this show is, make an actual mixtape with these songs.
That's great. I mean, that's really you're asking. How about make a playlist on your phone? Maybe.
No, why not? I want a mixtape.
That's like mixtape. Or I mean, yeah, that's certainly like the A+ above and beyond.
Did we name this podcast the playlist? No. Yeah, that
maybe
would
at
be the NFC East playlist. That would sound so stupid. Oh my gosh!
Come on,
can't believe you want that.
It's not practical. We should build an NFC East mixtape playlist.
Well, these would be the first 3 songs on it, obviously.
Right.
Which, ironically, the first one is called "Stop," even though the goal is to go through all of them. So let's just leave. Say one final word.
One final word.